And we're live. We're live. Welcome, friends, to another Collector's Series episode. My friend Phil Philmington, round 2. How you doing, man?
Thanks for having me, man. I'm doing great. How are you doing, DPZ?
Doing good, man. Doing good. Well, today is the 24th of August. This show will run on the 26th. You got 2-day head start. But we did find out today the UCL tear of Shohei Ohtani. That is first and foremost on, I think, most of our minds. Wax collectors from 2019 on tops. I don't know, is it 17? 18?
18 tops, 18 Bowman for the most part, yeah.
18 tops, 18 Bowman. So those wax prices are probably going to see it's going to be interesting. Maybe nobody reacts. Maybe people do react. So we're going to jump right in, man. I want to jump right into the thick of it. Let's get into the meat and potatoes. What's your reaction right now?
Yeah, as a baseball fan, if I step away from my own interests, it sucks. It's a massive blow to the sport. It's a massive blow to the hobby, particularly the baseball side of the hobby. You had mentioned maybe prices don't go down. I mean, in situations like these, they have to. Based on where his prices got to, like going up like 50, 60% in season after they were probably already up 10, 20% after the WBC, after he struck out Trout. At that level, you have a lot of expectations baked in. And he's not going to become another Bo Jackson or Deion Sanders where he's just like a flash in the pan and there's no collectability years to come. He's done a little bit more than guys like that, but I bring up the comp because how much brief stints of brilliance are definitely worth something. And I've always said this, and in the past I've said, we have to measure Ohtani differently. He doesn't need to do what he's doing for 10 to 15 years. The milestone stats, strikeouts, home runs, they don't matter as much to a guy like him because of how much a unicorn he is, in the fact that we only see a guy like him every 100 years or so. But some amount of longevity is needed, clearly. And I think we were hoping to see 5 to 7 years of just peak dominance, two-way production. And by two-way, I don't mean being a closer, which is probably on the table now for the second half of his career. I mean being a starting pitcher, logging 150 to 200 innings a year in addition to jacking out 35 to 50 home runs. This year he was on pace for more than that. So it definitely puts a damper into things. He still wins MVP. He still gets credit for that. But he was on pace for 58 home runs. He was on pace for perhaps his best season yet. If you're to look at total across the board production, 1,000 plus OPS on the offensive side, which tends to drive the hobby more. Offensively, certainly would have been his best season and probably still is, as a matter of fact. So it sucks. And also the second UCL tear. So there's long-term questions and going back to is he turned into a closer? Is his ability to be a pitcher into his mid to late 30s, is that now in question? Is he just going to be a one-way player? Does that mean DH? Does that mean outfield? If you look into other aspects that could affect his value in the short term, you look into the hype that would have been building in the offseason for this massive contract, probably going to a major market team. Now that's still going to happen. He's still probably going to get the biggest contract ever, 400 to 550 million maybe. Mm-hmm. But it's not quite going to be the same. So it's not like you're going to be able to get the best of Ohtani right away. Maybe you're able to use him as a hitter. At some point during the season, it kind of all depends on if he does get the Tommy John surgery, if he's able to contribute kind of earlier in the season as a batter or not. But yeah, I mean, this sucks. I assume, there's always weak hands in the hobby. And as I said, I mean, there was already a lot baked in. His prices already went up a lot this year. If this happened last year, I think you wouldn't see as much of a softening in his prices. Maybe 30, 35%. You see even the rare stuff go down that much. The base cards, maybe a little bit more. The less rare stuff. Wax, it all depends on how much Ohtani's driving that product. If we're talking 18 Bowman, something I have a lot of, he's pretty much driving the entire product, and I could see that going down. Closer to 30%, and maybe some of the stuff like Topps Update, Topps Chrome Update, some of the stuff that has all three of the players, Acuna and Soto as well. Even Topps Chrome, the fact that it has Acuna in it, that could fall maybe like 20%. But the thing with wax, like, even though there's a finite quantity of it, wax from like the last 5 to 7 years is going to be highly correlated with player performance. And the one nice thing, if you're holding wax, I probably won't be selling a lot of it right now, at least, because I have plans for it next year and I can stomach the hit, and I got in at good prices. But sometimes it can take, the wax market lags the single market a little bit. It could be 60 days, 90 days for like wax to bottom after the individual single cards bottom, which could happen maybe in the next 2 or 3 weeks, just guessing. The news of the Tommy John could start that bottoming effect, although it's sort of implied already. We'll see, man. It's interesting as somebody like me who doesn't own a lot of Ohtani singles, because I was sort of waiting for that injury, right? Waiting for his prices to become affordable. Always like talking myself out of buying because there's so many different cards out there, even the high-end stuff, even the rookie card autograph stuff. There wasn't a clear hierarchy. I sold one of my better Ohtani cards, which was a Sapphire base card. I just figured like base is out of style. The Acuna card, which was sort of like leading that set from 2018, wasn't doing well. Even though he's having a career year himself, it was still at like last year's prices. And the pop counts have really soared on those cards, in excess of 100, I think, for Acuna and Ohtani at this point. So I was able to sell that for an all-time high price. I think it was like July 3rd. And I'm happy about that. But the whole time I wanted to kind of get back into a more rare card of his. I was just kind of waiting for the right timing. So somebody like me right now, there's probably a lot of auctions out there for Ohtani. Actually, there are. I've checked. A lot of it is good stuff. So I might try to make a move while the supply is high. We'll see if that transaction volume stays consistent. Now that people know they're going to take a haircut, now that the news is out, a lot of these auctions started before the injury news. So it'll be interesting. But if I make a play, it'll probably be within the next 3 weeks, I'm assuming, if I do buy into any of his cards. But as you know, I already have a lot of exposure to Topps Update and Topps Chrome Update and 18 Bowman and a lot of other stuff I actually just picked up. Again, some of it was at decent prices, I feel. So I think, if you bought Ohtani this year and you're freaking out, if he does fall about 30 to 35% from yesterday's prices, or I guess you're going to publish this a little bit later, so what's that, Wednesday's prices, if he falls 30 to 35% under those prices, then you're still looking at probably higher prices than February and March before the WBC. You might be looking at something comparable to April, because again, his prices have come up probably close to 50% this year. So take 30% off of that, you're close to where you started, really. Because 30% off a bigger number, as you know, you're a banker, it's going to be a higher amount than the 50% up. So it just sucks, though. Yeah.
Well, it's interesting because, like, right now, as a banker, you think about asset liability management, right? So you buy something now, is it going to be worth less or more later? You forecast it out. Was this decision right now the best decision for that money, and at what rate you're paying to buy it? Or, obviously it's banking, so it's a little bit different. But, you think about that when you purchase a card. So if I'm thinking Ohtani, when do you buy him? I mean, you said wait. What if he just becomes a DH and a hitter, just a really good hitter, and he's just another really good hitter? We don't forget about what he did,
right?
But if he's not going to do it anymore, he's going to be like a Bo Jackson mythical creature for a generation. But then after that, he just becomes a really good hitter. What happens to his market then? What would you think?
Well, I think, reading between the lines what you said, I mean, there's a chance that things get a lot worse. It's still a risk. It's not a lock if you buy today's prices and he ends up getting a big contract and not really paying dividends to whatever team he goes to. There's a lot of guys that don't rebound after a second UCL tear. I mean, it's a very fragile ligament. And I mean, now, like, it's sort of like the 3-strike system, right? If he has a third Tommy John, I mean, there's hardly anybody that's recovered from that and put in like meaningful work beyond 500 innings, 200 innings. It's, Yeah, so then you have to worry about that too. So, I mean, he can carry his own as a hitter. This year, he's probably had, on a per plate appearance basis, him and Corey Seager, there's probably nobody close to them. Well, Aaron Judge has missed a lot of time, but those three, I feel like, have been incredible. And actually, if you look at like the WAR calculation, being a DH really hurts. It gives you a negative positional adjustment. So if Ohtani was to move to like even left field, where you don't get much credit, but at least it's a positive versus like a negative, and that's what you get if actually is either it doesn't hurt as much being a left fielder versus a DH, and that could actually. I wouldn't say he could be like what Mike Trout was for the first 5 to 7 years of his career, but he could still be a generational type bat based on what we've seen this year. It's really this year with 1,000+ OPS. He's still striking out quite a bit. But 300+ average, I never thought we'd see that out of Ohtani. I thought he was more like a 240, 260 guy with like 30 to 40 home run pop. I thought the first half of 2021, one of the reasons probably I didn't buy into him, I thought that was sort of a mirage a little bit, just like an outlier. Clearly not. Hits the ball really hard. And if you looked at his StatCast data from that season, not just the first half of his breakout 2021 from an offensive perspective, but the whole season, he looked like a left-handed version of Fernando Tatis. And that was the year that he like went nuts too. So hard hit rate and exit velocity and barrel rate and all that stuff. So yeah, I mean, if you have serious doubts of Ohtani becoming anything like Bo Jackson, nobody goes to a card show like specifically seeking out Bo Jackson and willing to pay high prices for his stuff. He's not a guy that moves a lot. I think Bo Jackson had like 2,400 major league at bats. So, and maybe played like, I don't know, like 36 games in the NFL. Deion Sanders probably somewhat similar with like the baseball. So it's not exactly the same. I think Bo Jackson never hit more than like 280. He never went 30-30. I think he was close. But I mean, what's more impressive, being a two-sport guy playing for two different organizations, two sports, or being a two-way player in today's game? You could probably make arguments either way. Baseball, being a hitter and being a pitcher, that in itself is almost like two sports. Doing it the same day is probably even more impressive, for Ohtani. Either way, preparation is almost impossible to be able to do.
Well, it's longevity. Let's go back to what you said. The longevity is really what we're looking for with Ohtani. Longevity on when it comes to either of those scenarios for an athlete. How long can you do it? And I think we all know that's going to be hard to do, and we're seeing it now. We're seeing the wear and tear on the body, the arm. It's his body is his limitation, right? It's not his talent. We know that. He could be a closer. I mean, maybe he buys himself 2 or 3 more seasons being a closer. I don't think that's not a bad thing. If he just devoted himself to his bat, I mean, the guy, he's probably top 3, top 4 hitter in the league for the next 2 or 3 years, or at least 4 years. The way he hits, and his hard hit rate and all that. But yeah, it's an interesting conversation. I don't know if I'd be knee jerking. I do wonder what are teams signing next year? Are they signing a really, really good hitter, or are they signing a generational unicorn that you just never see? Not even generational, like once, twice in a lifetime type player that you just never see. Is he going to get money for that, or is he going to get money as like a top 3 or 4 hitter? And I mean, I think he can go either way, but I lean towards he's going to get paid like a hitter, because I don't think teams are going to be as confident.
Yeah, he's going to get paid as some sort of a unicorn figure too, just from like a endorsement, advertising, marketing standpoint. And I think you can benefit from that if you are buying his cards or selling his cards within the next, 6 months to a year, before we realize like what Ohtani is as a 35-year-old. There's still that upside. There's still that memory of who he was. And at this point, there's not really much clear competition from like top player in the game today. Like, okay, Acuna does it 1 year, Soto does it 1 year, Tatis does it for a little bit, Trout's clearly falling off. Mm-hmm. He's still the generational guy for the 2020s. So I think that helps him in the hobby. Where with like football, like you look at like next generation, Herbert and Burrow, if one of them was to fall off, there'd be like another guy that could clearly take their spot probably right away. With Ohtani, it's him and everybody else. So,
Yeah.
and, factoring in Mahomes, it's really Mahomes and everybody else, in my opinion, in football. And maybe there's probably even more separation there. But I was looking at like the newer class of guys for football. But yeah, it's it'll be an interesting next 5 to 10 years from what we see out of Ohtani. I could see him being a closer into his late 30s though, and that would preserve his workload. I think that's one of the issues now. Like, I was seeing his innings and his strikeout count in the first half, and I'm like, oh wow, they're really trying to get a lot out of him so they can trade him. Or so they can just like milk him for his last season, talking about the Angels. Then I looked at the season prior and I'm like, oh, wait, it's like about the same, like on pace for like 200 innings ish, right? Like, it's kind of a lot for a guy that has a lot on his plate and has an injury plagued past in a way. If you look at, his first couple of years in the league, I think he's escaped that. And a lot of people it's recency bias almost with like people's injury status. It's like, well, he's been healthy now, so he's no longer an injury prone guy. Like Carlos Rodon, it's coming off one great year with the Giants, and the Yankees sign him and they give him a contract like as if he's not an injury prone guy. Well, maybe he was a little bit lower in a shorter term, but I know in fantasy baseball we all like drafted him early, like, oh well, he's no more likely to get injured than everybody else. Well, what do you mean? His injury factor was higher than everybody else the year before of his breakout, because we were looking at the last few years before that. So I don't know, not saying he's like super injury prone. He's twice as likely to get injured, I would argue, but the injuries that have happened to him, most of them have been related to his arm, which is unfortunate at this point. Not that what Trout's dealing with is any better. I mean, he's all over the place and he's got that long-term back issue. Yeah. I think at this point, Trout's like almost better off just being injured, so people can remember the first half versus, the second half. Like, a lot of people look at Pujols as like a tale of two halves. And of course, like that last season he had, which is pretty insane. But if anybody gets a bump from this Ohtani thing, I would have said Trout, but he's injured again. I would have, Babe Ruth, but it's a completely different segment of the market. Barry Bonds. I don't know. I don't know if there's much good from this crisis, to be honest.
Yeah. Well, let's switch gears. I want to ask you next about, before I talk about the next topic, I mean, we talk about Trout, we talk about Ohtani. Well, let's just talk about baseball card. I'm going to talk about a certain card and its relevancy in the hobby, the superfractor. Now, everybody knows that the base set superfractor is the one you kind of want. It's the best of that particular set. So it's Topps Chrome. It's 2012 or 2022 Topps Chrome. That superfractor is the superfractor you chase, or is it? Do superfractors matter? I mean, from your experience and what you see, your thoughts, your opinion. I mean, there are a lot of superfractors out there, right? And they're going to continue to make one every product for that particular player. Does it, say, let's use Mike Trout for an example. I mean, would it be wise to invest or buy a Mike Trout superfractor?
So I think just in general, buying like second, third, fourth, fifth year cards of players, like the only thing that's going to make those cards outperform the rookies and the more like staple, I don't know, desirable like stuff that's higher up in the hierarchy. The only thing that's going to make the second and third year stuff outperform the first year stuff is like some ridiculous like 2020 type event where the hobby becomes mainstream again. And then you have all these people that are priced out of the rookies already, and then they start to irrationally buy the other stuff, and it starts to go up from $1 to $20. In my opinion, not in all cases. Superfractors. So I feel like 2020 in the first half of 2021, it was all about the base card, right? Like, what are the most recognizable cards in PSA 10? And those cards all went nuts. And then people started to consolidate and get a little bit smarter, right? And then I think it was year 2022 where people started to really focus on anything that was a one-of-one, any superfractor. Maybe it was easier to move, and it became, from illiquid, people became more confident, maybe pricing data tools helped for people to understand what it's worth so they could transact and feel comfortable with that price or whatever. But people wanted the rare stuff. And they, in a way, they kind of still do today. Now you've got like Mookie Betts, Trout, and if you go before like 2011 or 2009, you've got guys that only have like 5 to 15 superfractors. And like those in theory should be more meaningful. And then today you've got guys like J-Rod that might have 5 platinum parallels in one set, right? So it's interesting because like one would think that, well, maybe the earlier stuff where there's fewer superfractors, like that'll hold value. And the stuff that comes later, maybe it doesn't. But the problem is it's just so confusing. You know, there's checklists out there. It's hard to get an aggregate view for the typical collector to understand like what they're dealing with like, what are J-Rod superfractors for the first 2 years of his career, including his prospect cards too. I have stayed away from them personally. If it was a rookie superfractor autograph from like Topps Chrome or Bowman Chrome first, or some other like meaningful set where I viewed like the base card and the other parallels to be like high on the hierarchy already, I might consider it. If I wanted to, you know, take out, you're going to have to like understand your risk tolerance. Like, well, now you're paying 40x more than the blue to get this card. You're paying maybe 2 to 4x the red to get this. Like, do you really want to spend that much on that player? But if I did, I'd consider it. One of the things I don't like, I know this is not what you asked, but I don't like paying up for the grade in a card that's already rare. So to me, a PSA 9 isn't worth that much less than a PSA 10. I'm not going to pay the 2.2, 2.4x multiplier. I'm going to pay closer to something like 1.5. Right. And same thing goes in the other direction. If it's a PSA 8, I don't really mind. You know, a PSA 7, I'll buy the card. BGS 8, I'll buy the card. It's not going to bother me as much. It's not going to be an eyesore to me. I'll just be happy owning the card. It's already special. It's already rare. But and this goes for all parallels. It's not just superfractors. They're not quite as coveted, and or they shouldn't be, and they won't be in the future once people realize that, as maybe they are today, because of so many other competing parallels.
And do you feel like, and piggybacking on that, is it just better to go with the first Bowman color versus the Topps rookie card? I think I'm going to get out of my I'll talk about this towards the end of the show, but I think I'm going to get out of my last modern card. I won't own one. And I have a Julio PSA 10 logo fractor, and I think I need to move it to make room for a bigger card purchase. But, you know, I have a few, I shouldn't say that, I'm lying. I have some first Bowman Chrome Mariners, some guys, but, you know, Mariners and who knows. But, you know, the thing that runs through my brain when I try to contemplate making the decision is, do I just want to do this now, you know, move this card now, pops 35 in a PSA 10, but move this card now, even though it's a rare card, and then just aim my sights, because I already sold the first Bowman Chrome I had, aim my sights back at a maybe blue, even if it's a 9 or a 10, get a blue or get a true color in a first Bowman Chrome and have that be the flagship card for Julio that I just keep, right? Go back and get that later during the off season or off peak time. What are your thoughts there?
Yeah, well, there's a lot there. I had posted something on Instagram like a year ago when people were contemplating, like, posing the question on social media, what's the desirable J-Rod rookie to get? What's going to be the one to get? And I get the difference between 2022 rookie cards and 2019 first prospect cards for J-Rod. But what I would say to that person is, like, buy the Bowman Chrome autograph. Yeah, but aside from that, I'd say buy the Bowman Chrome autograph. Just get it. And I'm not implying you should get the base. Personally, with J-Rod, I picked the refractors, some of the numbered stuff. For my own good, I was trying to look at something that was liquid enough. So I went for the number to 499 refractor. It's perceived as a true color, and PSA 10 grade. So high grade refractor. It's a decent combination. That in itself makes it a little more rare, a little more special. Mm-hmm. Now, people could argue and say that they'd rather have a PS9 blue, and I could see that. I wanted something a little liquid, but also something a little more special than the base. And
Right.
based on my multiplier research, I see in more recent years where the multipliers are increasing because they're printing more and more of the base. So I kind of wanted to get away from that. And that's been one of my rules going forward, is just targeting. If I'm going to hold it for more than like 4 to 6 months, I'm probably not going to buy just like a base Bowman Chrome autograph. But okay, so there's some people on social media right now that are saying, like, don't fall for the trap of first Bowman Chrome autographs, because these are cards that are initially picked up by speculators and gamblers, and artificially kind of manipulating supply as well as pumping up prices, because the prices are fueled by like irrational hype expectations, which is true. And I guess the point is that they never really recover, and the cards never get in the hands of collectors. And so you're dealing with bag holders. You're dealing with, it's almost like the story won't end well if you pick up a first Bowman Chrome autograph, because of the demographic that's buying those cards. Just, these aren't long-term holders, right? And that the growth, maybe it's been an organic, I guess, push to drive popularity of the cards and to drive values of the cards, but it's not really something you want to get your hands dirty with. So what I say is that first Bowman Chrome autograph, it's simple, right? There's only, well, I'd say there's only one, but then you've got Sapphire, in some cases first edition and a mega box, right? But in general, people that are true Bowman guys, like, don't consider that part of, like, it's not from a major release, so they're not going to put as much money into those cards, and as a result, they don't sell for nearly as much usually. So back to what I was saying. So you have simplicity if you stick to one of the 3 major releases: Bowman Baseball, Bowman Chrome, Bowman Draft. Each player is just going to have one autograph. Almost every player has one, unless, Jacob deGrom, Jose Ramirez, they weren't ever really expected to be good for the first like 2-3 years of their career. So maybe that's why they just never ever got one. Yuri Perez doesn't have one. He's a rookie this year. I assume he will. He was like a top 10 prospect at once. He might be in Bowman Chrome. We'll see. I just think that, just look at like what Fanatics or Topps is doing to the other brands, starting with Topps Chrome. Like, it's hard for me to even understand how much to pay for the wax, because they make so much changes to it from one year to the next, whether it's increasing the autograph subjects, decreasing the amount of hits, adding breakers to light boxes, completely screwing up the print run, or the print quality last year. Guys falling off the checklist randomly, just random autographs not showing up. Like, whereas like, was it Wander Franco's, like, the J-Rod base auto that never showed up, like certain colors maybe didn't show up. Like, people were questioning if that was an issue with Bobby Witt too, maybe, but those showed up. But like Wander Franco might be missing some stuff. And of course they said those guys were going to be on the checklist as short prints, and they had add the silver packs. And it just doesn't seem like Fanatics is taking Topps Chrome and the flagship products, meaning Series 1, Series 2, and Update, as seriously with respect to, let's preserve the brand over time. Bowman Draft, we see minimal print run increases, about 15% probably on average year to year. Topps Chrome, we've seen 33%. Topps Chrome Update, we've seen 50 to 60% at least. I think from 18 to 19, it was closer to 67% of the base print run. Series 1, I mean, that's been exponentially increasing. Complete sets. And then the retail. And I get it. I get it from a company. I'm not complaining from like a corporate or strategic perspective. Like, they should make those products accessible. And I like, as a guy that supplies wax to customers, I actually like that they're kind of like diluting the product while not diluting the rip, because they're adding all these like manufactured scarcity things. Like even the taco fractor, like everybody complained about that thing, but who's pulling it? There's only 5 of each player. Is it really an issue if it's so hard to pull? Frozen fractor, a little weird, but like any new innovation, if it fails, if they miss, they can always retract and just kill it, right? That's the beauty of innovating. And the things that work, they can continue to push those out. And Fanatics are doing a pretty good job of that. I know we're not supposed to be talking about how Topps Chrome is, what they're doing there from an innovative standpoint, but I would say there'll always be a place for Topps Chrome, Topps Series 1. For me, I'm going to go with Bowman Chrome. First autographs, I'm going to try to stick with true colors. It's been a tried and true formula. I know flagship golds have been around for over 20 years. But for me, there's too many of them. So you were talking about blue Bowman Chrome autographs. I made a point to somebody when I redid the color multipliers, and they were like, "Oh wow, orange went up a lot," which is number to 25 a true color. Mm-hmm. With regards to like that versus a base, like it stretched from like 15x to like, I don't know, 18 to 20x or something. And then they were like, but blue didn't change at all. And like some of the gold waves even increased. So I'm never going to buy blue ever again. That's what he said. What I said was like, I try not to give too many opinions on social media unless, I'm asked for it. And I understand that it's just an opinion at the end of the day, right? I'm not trying to sway people's decisions or anything like that for the most part. But I said like a whale during a bull market, if the high-end, ultra high-end market like starts to pick up again, those whales aren't going to overpay for a blue number to 150 because it's just not special. It's just not rare enough. There's 150 of them. They will overpay for an orange because they never come up. They might overpay for a gold. And with oranges, you see 30x multipliers on like the top 10% or top 5% of, the elite of the most elite prospects and players with Bowman, like with Tatis and Soto. You saw those 30x multipliers. The other guys were getting closer to 15x. Or with blue, everybody's getting close to 4x. And it's because of that, things are only worth as much as what people will pay. So throw the multiplier charts out the window. Like if this is the only time I'll be able to get it in orange, I already know who owns like the other 11 that have been pulled. This is my chance to get it, and I'm going to do whatever it takes to get it. Maybe they want to complete the rainbow. Probably not. They just want a very special card of that player. So, but personally, me, I do like the blue, and it's all relative. So like blue versus refractor, yes, the blue is more rare. It's still an original color. It looks great with the the blue marker, and blue kind of goes well with everything. It's just a classic choice. So yeah, I mean, if you're going back and you're going to blue, I would respect that. If you're going to refractors and higher grades, or even be just 9.5 true gem, whatever you want to do, that could make sense for certain players. At the end of the day, it's my opinion versus everybody else's. There's a lot of factors at play, and I could easily be very wrong if I pointed one person to orange instead of red shimmer. Who knows?
Blue's color match for the Mariners and for Julio, I feel like that. I don't know if there's a multiplier involved there for that specific. I mean, maybe an orange for Adley Rutschman, or a red. Yeah, Cruz.
The issue with the color matches is like the Mariners, perfect example. Like, does it really look better in blue versus purple? To me, I have the purple. I know it's not really that original of a color. Some will argue it is. The numbering schema changes when that happens and throw everything out the window. It used to be numbered to 10. Blue matches with a lot of teams. The Blue Jays, you've got the Royals, you got the Mets. There's probably like 10 teams that it matches with, but it has to be like the perfect match, in my opinion. Like, since blue matches with so many teams, you don't really see that bump, unless maybe it's the Blue Jays. But then maybe you'll see a little with Vlad. I think I've noticed that in the past. With orange with Adley, I'd say that's like a perfect match. Orange looks decent with some Mets cards, depending on like what's in the uniform. In my opinion, it helps if like the player started in that organization and is still there. Like in the case with Adley, in the case of Jackson Holiday, if he debuts with the Orioles. But still, you don't get that same multipliers you would in like football or basketball, where you're truly getting like the Jason Tatum green prism. At one point, that was selling for like 3 times more than it would have if there wasn't a color match. It's just one of those weird rules where people don't respect it as much with Bowman, I guess. It's just not as like standard of a treatment. And if anything, the premium might be 20% versus like something more significant you get in other sports.
Well, speaking of pricing in Bowman Chrome and prospects, Wander Franco. Wow. I think it's probably healthy and safe to say none of us saw that coming. I personally think he's done. He's toast. Anybody buying his cards right now, I mean, I don't know what you're doing. I don't see see an ending to this story that's going to be beneficial for anyone holding wax or cards. Unfortunately, tell me I'm wrong, or what's your opinion on the whole situation? What do you think happens?
Yeah, a guy I respect a lot in the hobby. He had a podcast at one point, a flagship podcast named Rob Kent.
Yep.
He's been kind of on my back a little bit over the last year about Wander's Instagram, saying like, this is like characteristic of somebody who's like a virgin, basically saying he's immature. And I meant to check that out because I do own a few Wander cards. I do have some 2019 product. Now, granted, J-Rod's in that too, but 50% of that value is still tied to Wander, unfortunately. So I'm selling that right now. And after Tatis went through his issues, it started with the injuries, and then it led to, and then from that it became attitude, kind of like, is this guy a team player or not? Is he an issue in the clubhouse? And then after that, it was the motorcycle accident where he broke his wrist, right, and covered it up or lied about it. And then it was the steroids after that. So, like, stupid decisions are correlated with stupid decisions. So after the Tatis thing happened, like, my takeaway from that was like, okay, yeah, I didn't have too much in Tatis. I had a few cards. But when somebody gives you those signs that they're an idiot, then it becomes on you to mitigate that, right? What's my exposure to this idiot? At the end of the day, these guys are people. And we've seen it more than ever over the last 10 years, given some of the consequences. Even if a player is cleared, like I think Trevor Bauer legally might have been cleared. You might know about this more than I do.
Yeah.
But he's still blacklisted from the game. Some of that has to do with his personality and, his lack of filter and the type of person he is and type of teammate he was. But maybe Wander's not that far off. But yeah, it's just, I missed it with Wander and I blame myself for it. I didn't look into him deeply enough. I should have, like, learning from Tatis. I was thinking that there were other players that are kind of close to him in age that I was a little bit more worried about, but I was looking into the wrong things and I didn't look deep enough into Wander. Is he done? Yeah, probably. And it's super sad. Like with Trevor Bauer, he was like a little bit past his prime. He's a pitcher. It doesn't matter as much for the hobby or real life baseball. He didn't come in as a, undisputed #1 draft pick with like one of the best hit tools, or #1 prospect with one of the best hit tools that we've seen ever, really. So it's unfortunate that we can never see what Wander was capable of. Not saying it's completely a done deal, but I'm listing some cards tonight in auction that I haven't yet because I've been super busy. Like, of course, like the week I'm super busy, I haven't, not that would matter. I mean, I think he got like a 65% haircut. Well, maybe it was like 50%, and then the news got worse, and then it's like, oh, there's multiple women. It's just really sad, man. It's sad. It's like this plus Ohtani. It's in like back-to-back weeks. Like this is terrible for the sport. Like these were like 2 of the top 10 most important athletes for the sport, probably. Yeah. Even though Wander's in a small market, it sucks, man.
And then coming off of Tatis too, you got to think you lump him in there too. I mean, okay, let's talk about the positive though. So Wander, I don't want to spend too much time and get down on it. So Wander, in all intents and purposes, is cooked as goose. And hopefully people can find their way out of those cards. I don't know how, because it's a zero-sum game at this point. Because whoever's going to buy that card is going to end up having a card that's worth nothing if he's no longer playing and or actually convicted of these terrible things. There are a lot of good things still happening in the game. Let's talk about them. And one of those things is Elly De La Cruz. He continues to play and impress at a high level. Rookie year, I get it. We need to see way more. There needs to be more of a body of work, obviously. But who does he remind you of? Ronald Acuna Jr. is having a terrific year. I'm going to continue to ring my own bell. I called this. But Acuna, Ellie De La Cruz. There's obviously other players that are having terrific years. Corey Seager, I mean, I know he's not a prospect any longer. He's still playing really well, showing everybody that he's still the same guy he was in LA. Talk to me about Julio, of course, he's all of a sudden became Julio again. Talk to me about your top base. Tell me your top 5 young players in baseball. The players that you feel optimistic about. I know it's impossible to do that personally with these players because they're so young. Can't hold anybody accountable for that because we just don't know what they're doing. But from a baseball perspective, now that we've seen Wander's off the list, right? Okay, so who are you looking at? Who's exciting to you?
So Bobby Witt's another guy that's really stepped it up. He's now like top 5 I think in the league in hits, hitting 280. There's a chance he could go 40-40. He would need to continue his ridiculous power pace throughout the rest of the year. I think he's only at like 26 home runs. But he's an exciting guy. I mean, him and J-Rod, they really started to turn it on, it appears, in like July. So yeah. I haven't been able to watch them a whole lot to see. But Acuna's kind of in a league of his own with regards to his pitch recognition, plate discipline, the hit tool, the power, the speed. This year seems like he's taking a year off from defense. He's just not focusing on it a whole lot. I guess that was the explanation that I heard on Twitter. Just like he's got like negative WAR, but he's usually a guy that's like a positive defender. And this is the reason why Mookie Betts is competing for MVP. I mean, it's gotten pretty close. And Mookie Betts, I think, went like 7 for 8 today with a walk in 2 games.
Wow.
So, but to your question, it changes so much because the hierarchy is unclear. Once you remove Ohtani from the fold, who still is my number 1, it kind of depends season by season. There's another guy that shines, another guy that regresses. Like Soto, he's been kind of frustrating this year. He looked great in the spring, hurt his calf a little bit. He's been up and down, overcompensating, swinging too much, taking too many pitches, just like pulling the ball too much, not pulling the ball enough, being too passive, being too aggressive. But Soto, for me, given what he's accomplished, given at least that he stayed away from injuries and stupid stuff, him and Acuna are probably neck and neck as my like 2 and 3 after Ohtani. After that, like J-Rod and Witt, they've got a little bit more to work on. Strikeout rate, walk rate, a little bit below what I'd want to see. At some point in their 30s, we're seeing this with Mookie Betts, right? You lose your speed, you lose your athleticism. Mookie Betts is still a really good fielder, but at some point and he won't be as versatile, you'd think. At some point, he won't be able to contribute that much with those things. I mean, he's still only 10 years in the league, roughly. So with J-Rod and Witt, they need to improve some of these like surface skills in order for them to to have the longevity plus the numbers to justify them being like generational or 1A, 1B.
Yeah. To be savvy baseball players.
Yeah. Like the 30-30, 40-40, like that stuff's cool and all. But there's probably been guys to do that with like a WAR of 3. Or to come close to that, like 30-30 numbers. That's not going to do it in itself. Witt, actually, so he went from, based on one metric, and one of the flaws with these defensive metrics is you see a lot of variability from year to year, in my opinion, based on what I've noticed with a lot of players. So outs above average is now the key component of Fangraph's defensive WAR. And it accounts for range. It replaced the UZR, and I think it might account for like throwing accuracy too, at least. Don't know that for a fact, but it's a big component. In Bobby Witt went from the 21 of 21, so like the worst shortstop that qualified last year with like X amount of plate appearances. He was the worst defensively and outs above average. So 1 percentile is what Baseball Savant had. Now, Baseball Savant has him at 100th percentile, literally like the best in the league shortstop. So his WAR goes from 2.3 to 5+ this year. And there's different WARs for like Baseball Reference. I tend to look at Fangraphs. Tends to be a little bit more like representative of like their true capabilities, in my opinion, weighting like offense and defense proportionally. even though he might go 40-40, being like a premium defender at one of the most important positions after catcher, it's the second most. It's the most important position after catcher for that defensive adjustment in WAR. He still isn't gonna put up like a 8 to 10 WAR like Trout did, and a lot of that has to do with he just doesn't take bases yet. He still has an OBP under 325 last time I checked. He needs to get that for me to buy into him, and I have some of his stuff already just because I like the cards more than the player, and I ended up backing into some of his cards. I'm like, oh, geez, let's see if this guy pans out. But if I didn't have him yet, I might wait till he gets that on base percentage above 330 for a period of longer than like 3 to 4 weeks, whether it's this year, whether it's next year. Probably wouldn't be the best time to buy him now. He's probably up close to 60% over the last like 3 months at this point. But he's exciting because I forget if I was talking to you. I think I was talking to somebody else on a different podcast. But like there's a handful of players, maybe 5 in this league that can become the next Mike Trout that are playing now. And Bobby Witt, yeah, sure. The likelihood is under 5% probably that happens. But he's on that short list based on what he can do, with all facets of the game. At one point, Trout was a pretty good defender, and he was stealing close to 50 bases, right? So
who are those 5 players?
Well, that was more of just like an estimation, but
I'll put you on the spot.
Tatis, but cross him out because there's a built-in ceiling to his values now based on the whole steroid thing, which is actually arguably more difficult to overcome than Wander if they gave him a second chance in the league. Just based on like Hall of Fame types of, I don't want to get into this because there's going to be people that probably argue with that, but let's not talk about that. So okay. I would say J-Rod, Ellie might be one of those, Acuna, and if you want to factor in Tatis, I mean, just like the true 5-tool dudes, Jackson Holiday. If you asked me like who's like the safest guy to buy right now, it actually might be a prospect, and that could be Jackson Holiday. But if you'd asked me a month ago, I would have said that. Now he's up another like 30-40% probably, and he's a hard guy to buy. So
Jackson,
but he looks pretty special. But then again, you got to put things in perspective. People are saying that his brother Ethan, I think his name is, looks like he could be just as good, if not better. They always say that. Like Ronald Acuna is like, oh yeah, Luis Angel, he's gonna be better than me. The Benji and Jose Molina said Yadier was gonna be better, and they were right about that. But not always is the youngest the best. Oh, Kyle Seager said Corey was me better, and nobody believed him, and he was much better. So maybe there is something to this. I don't know.
Well, okay, so I'll ask you one more question. Juan Soto. Is he Ronald Acuna in April? Is he the guy to pick up in the offseason, going to have that bounce back year?
I don't know.
Are you just kind of lukewarm on him now?
Put your money into like a 5% savings account instead, given the current environment. I remember there's a podcast, a financial podcast I listen to. Some of you guys probably know of it. Josh Brown, Downtown Josh Brown, The Compound is the name of it. This guy's a regular CNBC contributor, but he's like more unfiltered, and he brings on a lot of guests. It's less about his perspective, more about his team and his guests. And he was saying like where like the fractional stuff was starting to pick up with like Rally Road and Collectible. It was interesting to hear his perspective as like a non-card guy and as a Wall Street guy, investor dude. He's like, these people just like donate your money, get rid of it. Just like stop being stupid, stop doing dumb shit, stop buying fractional stuff you can't even afford. And he's like, you know what? And the other guy, Michael Batnick, was like, hey, hold that, like, calm down. You don't really believe that, do you? And he's like, no, I do. We're keeping it real here. That's why I started this podcast. And he's like, it's probably going to take interest rates. And this is when interest rates were low. This is in 2020, by the way. It's probably going to take, interest rates, talking about like savings rates, to go back to like, I think he gave a number like in the 2s or 3s, and now they're well above that. Basically, for people to take all of their money out of cards, realizing that a lot of these alt assets aren't really investments. So I'm not taking that stance, but the stance I'm taking in today's episode is that right now it just might not be the best environment for cards if you're talking opportunity cost. And you can say the same thing about stocks. Like, I feel the same way about a lot of stocks and about crypto, about a lot of things. Like, even gold and silver. Like, there's just a lot of things right now where, like, I don't know. There's probably some better opportunities out there. It's probably thin with the alternatives that are maybe wise, sensible, that do have some upside. But for me, and I know this isn't a financial sort of podcast with you, but since you asked me the question, I'm not going to have anybody buy Soto. I'm not going to sell mine. And part of that is because he's one of the guys I PC. I have sold a few already. We talked about that in the last episode, I think.
We did.
But the bigger cards I'm going to hold on to. And he's a guy that I could see falling a little bit more from now through like December. I don't know if this time, like he tends to get a lot of buzz in January, but there's a lot of distractions this time around. A lot. Last year he was helped because a lot of dudes had bad years. Like, other than J-Rod, guys got hurt. Guys had, like, people soured on Vlad after his performance, and others, and Acuna just like almost a lost year, even though that was because of, recovering from an injury. And I felt like in Wander had the injury plagued year. I felt like Soto, that was like his last chance to get that offseason hype. This year, I don't know if he gets the same hype. I don't know if he does. And there's a lot of distractions now.
Well, I'm going with the philosophy of focus on winning over time, not winning every time. And I say that I'm rolling my dice there. I'm getting rid of stuff and I've learned that some stuff that I thought was, very collectible, sought after is not. It is not. There's a handful of cards out there all across the different sport landscapes and players that are sought after. And it's certain sets, key rookies, numbered, again, we go back to sometimes some of these lower numbered cards. The grade is it's all about eye appeal, the registration, all of that. But that's where I'm rolling my dice. I'm getting into some of these big cards, not as many, 10 to 12, but 10 to 12 cards I need to put in a safe deposit box. 10 to 12 cards I don't feel comfortable having in my home. Those are the kind of cards I'm going for. And will you call them investments? I don't know. Good stores of value? I don't know. 2 to 3% increase year over year? That would be acceptable to me. I think at some point I think it'll be, stronger hands holding those cards. That's where I'm aiming. And I think that, you can earn 5% on a CD right now for 3 or 6 months. In fact, I think our bank's even offering that right now. There's the inverted curve, a yield curve. It's affecting a lot of, there was a lot of money on the sidelines, and then it was all deployed. And now all of a sudden, everybody's chasing the rate, and it's, we're having to manage our book different, and I think everybody's making those decisions. I am rolling my dice for winning over time. And I'm not saying everybody should do that. I am taking a gamble on that, but I do believe, with the kind of player I'm buying, Kobe, Griffey, and they're very important cards, I feel good about it. But there is an opportunity to have fun, and to have fun with some of these young baseball players is definitely there. Phil, you gave us a lot of great stuff to think about, man. If you're watch it again, rewind, watch it again, take notes. I've been taking lots of notes these last couple of weeks. And again, all next week. But take notes. These are great. This is good stuff. And I know it's a moment in time. And when Phil and I talk, it's always a moment in time. But everything is always changing. So thanks for coming on, man. I want to keep it to an hour. We're right there. And we'll definitely have you back, and we'll talk more about stuff in the offseason maybe, and kind of see how everything played out. World Series, who wins, MVPs, who's taking the hardware home. What is that doing to the prices? Is anybody going to move hot stove? All that stuff. There's lots of fun stuff coming up. I'm excited about the offseason. Where does Ohtani go? What's the surgery do to him? How's this going to play out? So many things. Thanks for joining us. Had fun. Thanks, DPZ. Appreciate it. You got it, man. Everybody take care. Go subscribe to the channel. Follow Philmington at Philmington. He's everywhere, man. Go follow his channel. He's got great stuff. His rookie card explosion box stuff is pretty rad. Go check it out. He's a plethora of knowledge. All right, bud. We'll talk to you later.
Thanks.
Oh, yeah, there it
Take
is.
care.